Now, I had a plan right now to talk about, there's a lot of stuff tonight, a lot of stuff to get to, okay? But Mark McGowan. Now, Mark McGowan is the Premier of Western Australia, and he will win by a country mile the upcoming state election, okay? He'll win like every seat in the lower house, and if he somehow can find a way to win every seat in the upper house and then invent a third chamber where he'd win all of that, and then he'll be able to be in charge of your school fate. He'll be elected, you know, a prom queen in America. You get it, right? He's going to win. But if you think that this bloke deserves to win in Western Australia because he's a good leader, you're wrong. If you think this is a bloke who is a dynamic politician, you are wrong. Instead, this is a bloke who the way he cuts his nails is to scrape the bottom of the barrel all day, every day, and it's going to work. But amazingly, the latest example of the idiocy of this bloke, the bloke who at one point in time said that eastern states shouldn't be allowed into the West because the only reason the East wants the West is because of our tourism dollar. I still don't know what he was really trying to say. The bloke who's constantly scared of population but not done any of the actual work on contact tracing or all that other stuff. There is a meeting of National Cabinet that is supposed to be a face-to-face meeting of the state, territory and federal leaders. Off the Zoom and let's look each other in the eye. But extraordinarily, we hear today via the state political reporter of the West Australian newspaper that Mark McGowan, and I'm not joking, is not going to Canberra because he doesn't want to be in the same room as Stephen Marshall in South Australia because they have COVID cases. Honestly, think about how bog-stupid this is. Let's take the word coronavirus out and say supplementing another thing that clearly Stephen Marshall doesn't have. Oh, that's right, girls' germs. Like, this is literally the quality of leadership in our country. And these people have been empowered to become the board of the country. And the Prime Minister ends up being its CEO. This is the supposed brains trust of government in Australia. And I repeat, this bloke will absolutely rip it in at the next state election. But honestly, I'm not going to go to Canberra because there's COVID in his state. He might cough, he might give it to me. If your teenage children behaved like that, what would you say? This bloke is the Premier of Western Australia. And one of the many things that he has been serving up in a buffet of misinformation and spin that Palaszczuk would be proud of and Andrews is mildly inspired by, is that he likes to tell the West Australian people that we don't need the rest of the country to exist financially. That our iron ore deposits, our royalties are what keep our budget in the black. They are what have delivered the only surplus in the country. Well, are you paying attention right now, those of you who still pay attention to whether this bloke is the full dickhead or not? I'd like to turn you to documents from a far right-wing think tank that might upset a few people on Twitter. It could get us banned. So outrageous are these documents. They are the Western Australian budget papers. Yes, this is budget paper number 3, freely available on their website, of which you can have a look at the revenue section of the West Australian government, where guess what? The number one source of revenue to the West Australian government is the rest of the country. $9.8 billion in Commonwealth grants. Now, I hate to break the bubble here. That means money comes from Adelaide, well, not much, Melbourne, Sydney, Port Macquarie. It comes from all over the country. And the second biggest source of revenue, state taxes, $8.8 billion. And the third, less than $1.6 billion than the gift of your fellow Australians, oh, that'd be mining royalties. Oh, and by the way, when we actually had a look in this state budget today, we saw what might be I wouldn't dare say a fiddle for political reasons to guarantee that you were the only people who put forward a surplus in an election year. I wouldn't dare say that. But what's quite interesting is when you, again, have a look at his own budget papers, here is what is going to happen in the next little while. Taxation, overall, 8.8 billion becomes 9 billion, 9.6 billion, 9.9 billion. Money from the Commonwealth, 9.8 billion to 10.9 to 11.2 to 11.9 billion. Royalties, 8.2 suddenly goes to 5.7. Then it's 5.8 and then it's 5.8 again. All spin, no substance. He's not fair income. And just finally, the good people of Western Australia, you know he's from the East Coast too. He will shit it in at the next election. But this bloke thinks you are an idiot. This bloke thinks he can win that election by lying to you that he kept you safe. He thinks that you will vote for him because we took care of an economy that made sure that the royalties kept our budget in surplus. Never forget, the FIFO workers, who were the ones getting their hands dirty and digging up the stuff that saved the budget, because of his own harsh border rules, weren't allowed to see their families since February of this year. And now he's not going to go to National Cabinet because the South Australian Premier might have COVID. He'll win. He might be an emperor, but this emperor is as stark as they come.